Well, hello everyone. Welcome to this week's special episode of Recruiting Live. My name is Katrina Kibben, and before I introduce my very special guest today, I just want to give anyone who's new to the show a little background on what to expect and how you participate, because I think it's important that you participate because this is not a webinar. Do not expect slides. We didn't make any, so if that's really, one of the things you absolutely need, sorry, you're not going to get it today. Recruiting Live is about giving you access to people who know recruiting and HR who can answer your questions. So we'll want you to use that question pane to participate today. If you go to the question pane, just as always, why don't you shoot me a hello, let me know that you're here, the digital howdy, so to speak. Give it a test, make sure you know how it works. And if you are live tweeting anything really smart that we say, if we say anything really smart, I would hope so, use hashtag RecruitingLive. And our team, I have somebody on our side over here at Recruiting Daily who will be watching this stream. So yeah, that's the deal. Now, I would like to introduce you to one of my favorite people, and I mean this with all sincerity, Laurie Ruettimann. Laurie, why don't you tell people a little bit about you and what you're working on right now?
Oh my God, I'm totally unprepared to do that. All right. Hi, everybody. We probably know one another, but if you don't know who I am, I'm Laurie Ruettimann. I'm a writer, a speaker, and a former human resources lady. I did some recruiting as well, so it makes sense that I'm on this show. I used to hire engineers, mechanical engineers, chemical engineers, civil engineers, and some IT professionals, and pilots, both helicopter and regular aviation pilots. But anyway, that's all very boring. I'm a blogger. I speak on all sorts of different leadership and HR topics, and I've decided to throw all of that work away and start a software company. I'm, either crazy or onto something, and the concept is all around beating failure earlier in a project. So that's what I'm doing.
Man, and we're definitely going to talk more about failure because I think that's a consistent theme no matter where you work in the world of hiring.
Yeah.
But I want to start by talking about role models, because if anyone read the lead post on this, people talk a lot about their role models and why they admire them. And we were talking a little bit in our pre-call about role models, and one of yours is Naomi Bloom.
That's true. Yeah. That is true. So Naomi Bloom is fantastic. Not only is she just someone who most HR technology professionals know, but her early work in the field of computing and coding impacts the lives of almost every worker around the globe in some way. She's an original woman in STEM, in technology, and from there has gone on to be a very thoughtful and progressive businesswoman who can live her values around being inclusive, bringing women up with her, thinking about diversity in the right kind of way, and also going in a room and just being tough and really speaking critically and honestly about software. So she was my role model very early on when I started to blog and started to really get to know the world of HR technology. But in starting a software company, she's just really helpful for me to bounce ideas off about leadership, poise, communication, the balance between politics and having a voice versus being professional. She's good. She's badass. And so that's why I wanted to bring her up today. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. And
Very
so if they wanted to follow her on Twitter, I've seen her on, that's where I've seen most of her because Matt is constantly retweeting her. So where do they find her? Isn't it at Naomi Bloom?
I don't remember. I can't remember things like that. So I failed. But you can go into Twitter because it's a search engine and type in Naomi Bloom, and believe me, there is only one. You'll know her when you see her. She is tough.
In Full Bloom US.
Oh, in Full Bloom US. Thank you, Katrina.
No problem. I keep that up on the side. An Animal is already giving me crap for having pre-calls. We only chat for 10 minutes. All right, Animal?
Oh God, Animal. Back off. This isn't your show. Oh,
although I have to give him credit because earlier this week someone posted that they start their recruiting emails with, "I'm curious if you're open to a new role," and I immediately responded, "I hate that."
Yeah.
And in my head I go, man, I've been listening to a lot of Animal. I couldn't take it.
He does influence us all. That's true.
Yes.
That is true. Well, good.
Absolutely.
So Naomi Bloom, that's my role model that I think this audience would really enjoy getting to know and understanding, especially young women who are kind of coming up in the world of recruiting and sourcing. Naomi Bloom she's got your back. She's a trailblazer. So I don't know, Katrina, who's your role model? You have anybody that you can think of?
Well, I swear I'm not saying this because I'm looking at you, but I think that you and Heather Bussing are
Oh,
two that kind of
yeah.
float to the top for me when I think about that. And it's because I think on one hand, neither of you will sit and nod when you don't agree with something.
Yeah.
And I see that from a lot of women in this industry who will people get pepper ideas at them on a webinar or people ask questions and they sit there and go, men do it too.
Yeah, there are people out there who can't afford to do anything other than nod their head, though. So I have a lot of sympathy. And one of my idols is an author by the name of Roxane Gay, and she's about to publish a webinar. She's about to publish a memoir, and she pulled her deal. She said, "I'm done with my publishing company because they're going to publish a book by an alt-right blogger." And she said, "I don't want anything to do with this brand." So it's important for women who can say no and put up boundaries to do it because there are a lot of people who can't, both men and women. So I don't take the position I'm in lightly. And believe me, I've paid a price for being mouthy and having an opinion, but I'm able to do it. I have a little bit more runway, a little bit more freedom to take risks. And so I do it and hopefully inspire other people. So thank you. And Heather Bussing is also another woman who kicks ass, undoubtedly. So yeah, she's good.
I love that, she knows her stuff. I
Yeah,
mean, big time.
totally.
I went to a webinar on fair pay just because she was presenting it and I learned so much. But then when I was tweeting, she corrected me on my tweets. It was like, no, no, no. This is this, and this means this, and this
All
is
right
how it
then.
works. But you know what? In the end, I'm going to be able to use that. So I'm not going around spreading fake news that I think is true, right? That I made up in my head.
Right, right. Yeah.
Um,
Alternative Facts by Katrina Kibben. I love it.
exactly. Well, and I personally, and I think a lot of people who try to blog or want to have a voice in recruiting find ourselves pushed towards, well, this is what people want to hear, whether self-pushing or by a company. And it's when you kind of rip that part off and go, no, this is what I want people to hear, that you can actually start to make connections and impact people with your ideas, I think.
Oh, I like that.
Um,
I like that a lot. There aren't enough role models in the world, male or female. I really feel this way. And when you find someone that you admire, it's really a special moment. And one of the things that I've had to learn to do is not to smother the person I love, or not even to mimic the person I love, because it's very easy for me. I am a huge mirroring type of person. So if I see somebody, I'm like, those ideas are not my ideas. I am you. And it freaks that person out. And it also doesn't allow me to develop a voice. And so when I'm totally in love with someone, my new tactic is to just be a lurker from a distance, which is equally as creepy. But one of the women that I love is Mary Ellen Slater. And I met her early and I'm like,
yes.
oh my God, I'm going to marry you. And she got married and I'm already married. So that didn't work out. But Mary Ellen Slater is amazing. And my instinct was to run to her and to be like her. But I checked it. And because of that, we've been able to develop a real authentic friendship where I'm not just a fangirl, but I had to trust that slow build.
Right.
So same thing with Naomi. I mean, Naomi and I at first were like, what are you all about? And we've developed a relationship over time. So I think if you find a role model, it's great to just fangirl the hell out of that person, but maybe do it in private at first and don't rush head first into someone's life. That would be my
Yeah.
only advice for people out
Oh,
there. Yeah.
totally. Tom Bolt said, "Can I have you and Laurie as role models?" You come on, Tom. We'll keep you.
Tom's the nicest guy. He doesn't need us.
I'm going to
He's
tell
doing
him
just
we'd be
fine
lucky
on
to
his
have
own.
Tom.
He's doing just fine. Yeah.
So let's talk about work, right? So how might you model that role model theory at work or try to build those relationships? Because I think women hesitate to ask to have a mentor. So
hmm
like what advice would you give somebody who's looking to build that kind of relationship in their company?
Yeah. I often say that if I had had like-minded women around me throughout the early part of my career, I would still be working in HR and recruiting. But I didn't. I am Gen X, and so when I worked in human resources and recruiting, there were a ton of baby boomers, and millennials weren't yet in the marketplace. They were still, loving Backstreet Boys and NSYNC and Britney Spears. So I was very young compared to some of my other colleagues, and I didn't have a lot of other people who looked like me, acted like me, thought like me. And of the women who were my peers, my age group, they tried to be like the baby boomers in our office. And I hate all of this generational stuff, but the only reason I bring it up is because those baby boomers were like my parents, right? And so not only did I have to hear the yapping in my ear from my parents, I would go to work and I'd have all these baby boomer women like, oh, you should be wearing scarves, you know? I'm like, what the hell? I don't wear scarves. You know, it's ridiculous. Anyway, so I had a lot of really difficult moments early on and did not find a mentor and really struggled and ended up leaving human resources. So if you love what you do, and I clearly loved human resources enough to continue blogging about it and writing about it, it's so important to find somebody who just feels your pain and can give you a space to really work out your problems and think about how to move forward. And unfortunately, oftentimes that person is not in your company. And I think that's where affinity groups, LinkedIn, you know, Recruiting Daily gives you an opportunity to connect across companies, across verticals, across industries, and find someone who feels your pain and can give you some really good advice. But if you look for that in your company and in your job and in your immediate community, you're oftentimes going to be disappointed. So does that make sense?
You can get trapped. Absolutely. I've been there before because you can get trapped in like almost a negativity circle. You know, like you're venting and they're doing the same work, so they vent too, and you don't have that productivity layer or the like, what are we going to do about this? How do we change this? You know, and I find that too with, you know, even advisory, right? Like when you're advising a company, I only advise one, so I don't have a ton of advice on that.
That's more than most people, so yeah.
But like they'll come and say, well, we need advice. We've kicked this around for so many hours. We can't take it anymore. And that's where, you know, the outside piece comes in, where somebody can look at it with clean eyes and answer your question really quickly that you may have spent, you know, 2 days talking.
Totally. It's so great to see this movement in human resources and recruiting start, this movement towards community and affinity, and continue. I mean, it's been going on for a while, but one of the groups that I really love is the Disrupt HR group, because it includes recruiters, sourcers, HR professionals, and I've seen it in these communities. I've spoken at a number of them. They start out with, you know, maybe 10 speakers and 50 people in the room, and within a year, if organized right by people who love it and are really passionate about it, they're creating just amazing conversations. I think about Disrupt HR Chicago or New York or Cincinnati or NOLA that happened the other day, and they're just bursting with cool ideas and cool people, and also people who traditionally may not look like they're disruptive and innovative, but really are. So if you're looking for a mentor, that's a place for you. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and they do a great job managing the format so that it feels disruptive. It doesn't feel like the same shit, different day.
Oh my God, I know.
9 times out of 10, you go to a conference and they're like, this is a disruptive, innovative, and then you're like, and there are 8 speakers today, and they each speak for 30 minutes, and they all have slides.
Yeah, it gets a little rote, and it also gets a little uninspiring, because what happens at these conferences, at least for me, is that I'm on stage, and people's expectations are low anyway, and they think, who is that woman trying to teach me something, right? I could be up there with a PowerPoint and in a shitty suit, you know, and they could absolutely do it. But Disrupt forces you to really bring about an idea in 5 minutes. And that's a cool and interesting challenge. So the format just takes everybody out of their comfort zone and good conversations happen. So if you haven't been to a Disrupt HR in your city, don't be turned off by the HR piece of it. There's plenty of conversations around talent. You should go. It's really good.
Yeah. I mean, to give you guys a highlight, I'm pretty sure Dominique Rogers threw a tampon on stage at Disrupt New Orleans.
Girl power!
At Robin Schooling. So if you're looking for something that will like entertain your mind, help you learn something, I totally agree. And a shout out for Michael Townsend for Disrupt HR Louisville that just happened, and he said it's sold out in its first gathering. Which is great for that.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Living here in Nashville and Louisville, you don't see a lot of conferences come through.
No, that's really great, and it's a testament too to the kind of conversations and talent that are, you know, that are taking place in this industry. Again, why did you all wait to have these conversations, right? You could have been innovative when I worked in human resources, but no, that wasn't happening. So I had to go be a blogger. Thanks a lot.
Right.
I really miss having PTO. I really
Right.
like my job back some days. Yeah, I do. Like, oh, it must be nice to be on somebody else's payroll. How does that feel? That's great.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So
I'm a real
speaking
happy entrepreneur.
I was just about to say, so speaking of entrepreneurship, let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about GlitchPath.
Oh, sure. Glitch Path is a labor of love. It's something I've been working on for about 18 months, and it was born out of a conversation with my friend Chris Ostich, who is one of the founders of a company called Black Book HR, now Telemetrics or something. I'm not sure
Oh
what it's
yeah.
called. And he also founded a company called Listener, which is like Shazam, but for bands and companies to connect people and audiences with products and services. So it's kind of a cool idea. Anyway, I told Chris Ostich after HR Tech 2015 that if I ever went to another HR Tech again, I would die. And he said, oh, and I didn't die, by the way, I've gone since. And he said, have you heard of a concept called a pre-mortem? I'm like, well, tell me more. And so he described a scenario that's been studied by scientists where instead of doing a post-mortem on a body, on a project, on an event, you think about the ways in which you will fail ahead of time. And you basically write yourself a love letter from the future telling yourself how not to fail. And I thought that's quite lovely. And I asked him, do you think this could be software? He said, yeah, and you're the woman to do it. And we laughed. How could this go wrong? I don't know anything about software, right? We did a little pre-mortem, and 18 months later, I'm still failing. But I've had a journey of a lifetime, and I know I'm a tech founder because I keep writing checks. That's how I
Yeah.
know that I'm doing this right. And it's completely
100%.
bootstrapped, yeah. But yeah, so what we're really trying to create is an online platform where people can really figure out how they're going to fail, and furthermore, get a report to tell them what the major areas of risk are. So we're using things like natural language processing, and I mean, I don't know. I have an engineer to do all this kind of stuff, but we're trying to figure out how people use language and how that can be predictive to tell the team how you're about to fail. So it's really cool. It's really the most challenging thing I've ever done in my life.
Yeah. I can only imagine, right? You're building a product, which is
Yeah.
what are the stats? Like what percent of entrepreneurs fail in the first place? It's high.
Yeah, it's like 95%. It's absolutely high. And it's
Yeah.
not just that I'm building a product. I mean, everything fails. And yet I'm trying to tell people it's okay to fail because out of failure is born something greater. It could be the opportunity to fail again and fail again. But it's about failing in new and more interesting ways. When I worked in human resources and even in recruiting, I filled the same jobs over and over again without asking why. Or I saw the same people having the same problems over and over again. Or in my family, the same people kept getting pregnant over and over again, right? And there's all sorts of stuff that happens in our lives. It's like, really? Didn't we just go through this? So
Yeah.
for me, I'm trying to change behaviors. I'm trying to change outlook. I'm trying to change the way that people interact with one another. And the way I think people change is not by interacting with your family. We change through our learning at work, and we often take that home into our personal lives. So for me, I don't want to be someone's therapist. I want to help them do their job better, and then they can take that and hopefully prevent their son or daughter from getting an STD or, any sort of crazy thing that happens over and over again in our lives. If I can get you thinking differently at work, you can think differently at home. So yeah.
Exactly. I was actually writing a post this morning about how gut feeling is
Yeah.
very like anxiety in that you have a physical feeling
Yeah.
and you have an emotional feeling, but you have to recognize the triggers of both to
Yeah.
recognize that you're running into this, whatever it is, if anxiety is at the end
Uh-huh.
or if your gut feeling that yes or no is at the end, right?
I
But
like
you
it.
have to be an adult enough to kind of recognize the feelings that are happening on both sides. And I think failure probably has some of those instincts too. There's a physical, like an actual feeling that happens, and there's emotional stuff.
For me, it's really freaking frightening how many people say, all right, I see how this can fail, but I'm still going to do it. And I'm actually doing that by being an entrepreneur, right? I'm out there saying, I know this is probably going to fail, but I'm going to take a shot. And so part of that is an inherent way that people are built. Some people are optimists, like strategic optimists, and failure is not an option. Cognitively, they cannot process failure. And I understand that a little bit because you build things up. You're like, I'm going to get through open enrollment. We're going to do it. We're going to make the deadline. And then when you fail, it's so devastating. And the other flip side of that is defensive pessimism, where you think everything's going to go wrong. Yeah. But you never quite see the thing that's going to hit you in the face. You see everything else, but you never see that one thing. Maybe it's in your blind spot. Maybe you just don't even know what it is, but you still fail. And so between strategic optimism and defensive pessimism, I'm trying to find a sweet spot where we can laugh a little, have great collaborative conversations, and maybe try to beat failure to fail in new ways. I mean, that's it. Right. That's all I'm trying to do. So from there, I have dreams of recommendation engines and predictive project management and all this kind of stuff, you know, but I want to get the pre-mortem platform right. And so that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Very cool. Aaron Daniels said, you know, failure is the dress rehearsal for success, which I think is probably a reiteration of where, like, yeah, you got to try again. And
that's great.
That's these a few times.
You know what, though? What if you never succeed? Like, this is my defensive pessimism. It doesn't mean that all of that was wasted, right? You know, because you have cool experiences and hopefully you get to meet great people, and maybe you need to recalibrate success at times too. That's what I think. So
yeah. Well, and I think that your product, I don't know it. Well, first question, is it, are you looking to build it for companies who are trying to help people, or are you building it for companies that are trying to build product and kind of on their roadmap, or both? Because when we first talked, I feel like it was company oriented, and I'm hearing more people tone. So which side are you trying to help?
I think it's both. Our go-to-market strategy is pretty clear. We're focused on people who are project managers or who help work flow through departments. They may or may not have that title. So traffic managers, recruiting coordinators, sourcing specialists, you know, people who really see a project and are responsible for getting all the different pieces in motion. Marketing departments oftentimes have a project manager or somebody who doesn't have that title. Administrative assistants often do this work as well. So if you're responsible for helping people succeed and pulling all the different pieces together, this is something that you can use before you even put the project in Trello, Basecamp, Asana, whatever it is that you, or Excel for goodness sake, you know? So this really is about pulling people together to think through their behaviors before you put pen to paper and start to write down your activities and your goals and your objectives. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, because it's so easy, and I think probably even more so in small companies, to run at something. Like, we need a website. Okay, we're just going to run. It needs to be this, it needs to be that, and then you spend so much time trying to fix when you probably should just slap a fail sticker on top and start over. Right?
Well, I think about ATS implementations all the time. In fact, I've had this conversation with Ed Newman like a million times. His work at the Newman Group, he could sleep through a conversation of how, you know, a piece of technology was failing because he knew it. You know, he's like, you don't even have to tell me, I already know how it's failed. But for some reason, technology companies, even though they know how their software implementation is going to fail, they overpromise and underdeliver. They don't manage client expectations. So for me, this is a really good tool if you are responsible for customer success to say to someone, hey, before we go any further, let's talk about how we know this is going to fail and how you think it might fail. My software will do a Venn diagram to figure out where there are similarities and differences, and it'll also categorize the different risks based on like team, time, budget, conflict. And so you get a holistic picture of your risk assessment. So that's what I'm trying to deliver. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boring. It's the most boring piece of software anyway.
Well, here's the thing though.
So.
Exactly. It's not HR, but it's a common thread no matter where you sit in hiring, because for one thing, buying technology, and I'm a broken record on this, there is no learning pipeline for HR and recruiting people to learn how to buy software, to learn accurate comparisons, to learn how to be a good buyer.
No.
I mean, that doesn't exist in the regular world. Like, where do we learn how to buy a car? Right? Like,
that's a good question. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a big investment. It's something that impacts us daily, but we take no initiative to learn how to be a good buyer. No. And I think that your software, it has potential to be able to do that, right? To like give people a little chance to learn how to be better before they get started, instead of jumping in and getting like, squarely stuck in a whatever ATS or fill in the blank technology.
Katrina, you're hired, right? There you go. As soon as I
talk about failure all day.
Yeah, let me get some money and you're on board. That's the other thing. I will know that this process has failed me if I don't surround myself with friends and like-minded individuals. So many people scale and build a company and they're hire this person, they hire this person. And for me, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be with people I like and respect, and not just because some, forgive me, douchebag was in a president's club at some other company, right? I'm working with people who mean the world to me. So that's important. So Katrina, anytime. I can't pay you right now, but.
No, well, and so many people also, on the startup note, let their VCs decide who they're going to hire. And that's not, I think that's another recruiting lesson, right? Don't let anyone decide. Like, you need to set those boundaries up front before you let anyone decide who you're hiring.
Nobody tells me what to do. Nobody. If I wanted someone to tell me what to do, I'd go take a paycheck. Right?
Absolutely.
That's how I feel. So it may be at some point that investors have opinions, but I will tell you right off the bat, nobody has ever told me what to do in my life, and that's both served me well and served me poorly at times, but it's not going to change. So there's the pre-mortem. How am I going to fail? Probably my own obstinance. We'll see.
And then for everybody who's looking for Glitch Path or wants to learn a little bit more, I dropped that URL in the chat.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, of course. And I know we only have a couple minutes left because time flies when you're talking life. And I want to talk about Hustle Up the Hancock, because I think we should all be doing more to help and getting out there. So why don't you tell people about that, and then I'm totally going to drop that URL for people too so they can donate.
Oh, that's very thoughtful. Well, my sister has been smoking since she was 15 years old and lied to me about it. I'm 10 years older than her, and I'm like, what, am I stupid? I know you're smoking. So for years, and now she can't quit. She's 32 and is really struggling to quit. And for years, it just drove me crazy. Like, what could I do to help her, short of locking her in a room without cigarettes for a couple of weeks? And I'm not sure that would work either. So anyway, I currently run up a skyscraper every year to benefit lung health. So I run for the Respiratory Health Alliance in Chicago. And I run up a building called the John Hancock Building. I run up 94 floors. This is my 5th year, and so over 5 years I've raised over 15 grand. And it's all about smoking cessation, asthma awareness, asthma prevention, COPD, and they're just an amazing organization. So it's hustleupthehancock.org, I think. I'm really bad at that. And you could donate to my hustle, or if you need information on quitting smoking or better asthma resources, they're amazing individuals. So yeah, that's what I do. Yeah.
And I put that URL into the chat as well, because spelling it for people, I think it took me 2 tries to write it down in the first place. It's bit.ly/LFR hustles 17. So I just put it in the chat. Because
it's long. Yeah.
If you didn't have your pen ready, then you probably don't have all that written down. No problem. No problem.
So did we meet your expectations today? Did we succeed or did we fail, Katrina?
I think we succeeded. I think that was a great conversation, and I hope people learned a lot. You can tell us in the question pane if you did. That's a great way to let me know. Hint, hint. We have a few questions in here. One, because I've gotten multiple comments on your cat pillow. People want to know where that cat pillow came from. Michaela specifically.
Oh my God, that's Lil Bub, Lilbub, and you can get it off of her website, so lilbub.com. So yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. I just answered that. All right, so that's our time. Thank you so much, Laurie. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. And next week we have Christopher Kurtz, who's going to be joining us. He runs the agency, I think it's like a consulting firm called Peer Through. And we're going to be talking about how listening can help you inform how you talk to people. So just really focused on listening and how that translates into communicating with candidates.
Oh, I need to watch that. That's good.
Yeah. Lots of nerdy talk every week at 1 p.m. For Recruiting Live.
Except for this week, but we just talked about myself, so sorry about that, guys.
I had fun. That's really, I'm kidding. Okay. All right. So lots of comments about really enjoying the conversation. So I think we knocked it out of the park, Laurie. All right, guys. So that's it. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everybody.